Welcome back to Northside Pyro. I hope you had a happy and safe 4th of July, that you blew off as many fireworks as you wanted to without blowing your budget. I know that we had an amazing time. You can see our video of the fireworks show that we put on this year up here. So check that out. See the good times that we had. And like I said, whether you were just lighting some off in the backyard or whether you're putting on a big neighborhood show, I hope that it was everything you wanted it to be. But today, what I wanted to do is to look at some more professional fireworks, and specifically to take a look at the different sizes of shells. There are shells ranging anywhere from 2 inches or 1.75 inches, which is your standard consumer shell, all the way up to 48 inches and the real world record breaking type stuff. And so I wanted to look at them at progressively larger ones and see what the difference was, see what the different effects are, and also see if we can notice a difference as we go up in size in the shells. Obviously, looking at the last one and looking at the first one, we're definitely going to notice a difference, but we'll see if we can notice a difference between, say, a 6-inch shell, a 6-inch shell, and an 8-inch shell. Before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at the anatomy of a shell. I have a picture here that's going to help us to do that. And so if we look here, we can see exactly how a shell, and this is how all shells are built, just with more or less layers. And so, for instance, a consumer shell would stop at that first layer of stars that you see, whereas the larger 48-inch shells would go to even 5 or 6 of those layers. And so you have the fuse that you light at the top, that goes down to the bottom. At the bottom, you have the lift charge. In the lift charge is a little piece of fuse, a time fuse that goes to the middle of the shell. You can see a lot of this in our dissection video. And then in the middle of the shell is black powder. The time fuse ignites that black powder. The black powder then ignites the layer of stars. That layer of stars is the actual effect that you see in the sky. Then you have another layer of black powder, which is another explosion, another layer of stars, and so on and so forth, depending on how big the shell is. And then you can see what it actually looks like. This is an actual cross-section of a firework. You can see this is a 3-layer one. And actually, what you'll notice is that the black powder almost looks like rice. That's because it is rice. A lot of these shells use dried rice that's coated with black powder, and that's a really effective way of getting the explosive in there. And so this has 3 layers. It has those square stars, and then the medium-size circle round stars, and then those larger round stars on the outside. And so this is going to be a multi-layer effect shell. And then we can see that there's lots of different sizes. Like I said, it goes all the way from 1.75 inches, which is your consumer, the kind that you can buy here in the United States. In Europe, they have some different laws in terms of what size you can buy, and they go up progressively. 8-inch and 10-inch are going to be sort of your standard big professional show size fireworks. And then when you start to get up into the really big ones, that's when you get into some really, really crazy stuff. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at some of these fireworks. So you can see we're going to start off with 1.75 inch. These are consumer fireworks. These are actually mine. These are from my 4th of July show. And, they're really, really pretty. Look how I think this is Ghost Dragon. There's, nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a really pretty effect. It's nice and big in the sky. People are impressed by it. And so let's move on to 4 inches. So this is already, you're not allowed to buy this. That's all there is to it. You have to have a license. You have to have a permit. You have to basically be a professional pyrotechnician. Again, in Europe, I think you can get some of these things with a little bit less of a hassle. And obviously in the United States on the black market, you can get your hands on some of this stuff. You'll see, I think, especially like out in Los Angeles, they have quite the culture of lighting these big shells. But throughout most of the United States, you can't, unless you know somebody, you're not going to get your hands on these things. The other thing really quick before we watch this, I wanted to notice is that you see that red strip. That's the fuse. That's what they call a pass fire or a quick fuse. He's going to light just a little tiny bit of cannon fuse, a standard fuse at the tip of it. And then once that hits that red, it's just going to immediately get all the way down to the lift charge. And the reason they do that is because it's easier to time out things in a professional fireworks show when you don't have to worry about a fuse slowly burning. When they can have that hooked up to an electric charge and just the instant they press the button, that thing goes up into the air, they're able to have a much more coordinated and timed out show. So let's take a look at our first professional shell. This is a 4-inch shell, obviously not being lit by a professional. But what are you going to do? No judgment here. If I had the chance, who knows, mate? I'd probably do it as well, to be completely honest with you. look, and that's a beautiful shell. So you have the chrysanthemum to the tips there, and again, you can already see much more so than what you can get in the stores in terms of a canister shell or a ball shell. That is a much more full effect. Let's just see if we can pause on the actual effect itself. That's a much more full effect. There's a lot less gaps in the effect coming out from the center of it. And it's only going to get bigger and better from here. So let's keep on going. So that was a 4-inch shell. Now we're going to have a 6-inch shell. You can see what it looks like. It basically fills up the entire palm of his hand. It's basically the size of a coconut. They actually call them coconut shells. And again, he has a pass fire here. Maybe not super smart about the tube that he's using, but what are you going to do? Nobody that lights these things off by hand is being particularly safe anyways. And so you can see the fuse lighting off, and then boom, it hits that pass fire, and it just immediately lights that lift charge, goes up into the air, and you can see a really full peony to a glitter effect. That's, that wasn't the greatest shell that I've ever seen, but certainly bigger and more full of an effect than anything that you can buy in your local store. So now we're really moving up. So now we're at 8 inches. When you go to a fireworks show downtown or your municipality is putting one on, the majority of the shells they're sending up into the air are going to be 8-inch and 10-inch shells. And it looks like, I think I'm seeing that this guy may have dug this tube into the ground a little bit, which means that he's being much smarter about it. He has a very long cannon fuse before it gets to that pass fire. So while it's not incredibly smart to be hand lighting these things, he's at least doing it a little bit smarter than the last couple of guys that we saw. So let's see what this thing looks like up in the air. So here we go. Oh, yeah, and you can immediately see. I mean, there's a major difference. And you can see just how big that was. And again, just how full it was. That's the other thing. The smaller the shell, sort of the more spread out those effects are going to be. The more spread out the stars are going to be. Whereas with the larger shells, it's going to be a much more dense effect. It's going to be much more intense effect that you're going to see up in the air. So now we have a 10-inch shell. Again, very, very standard for a fireworks show, for a professional fireworks show. I expect this to be really, really pretty. Let's see what this looks like in the air. Yeah, wow. See, now that's what you expect to see at your downtown fireworks show. When you go to a professional fireworks show, you're going to expect to see a lot of that kind of stuff. And then 12-inch shells also. 12-inch shells are going to be those are going to be your finale type shells in a professional show, maybe a 16-inch shell. And again, there you can see just it completely fills up the sky, a beautiful effect. And again, just more full, larger. That's where you're going to see the difference. The bigger you get, the more full it's going to be, the larger it's going to be. When you get into the larger ones, we'll talk about this in a second, then they can start filling it up with more shells, which just makes for real craziness. But right now, we're still using that model of what we saw, where it's just layers of stars and just more and more layers, and those stars are very densely packed in. And so here we're going to see a 16-inch shell. In your downtown areas, this is the biggest they're going to get. Most of them are not going to go bigger, especially in the United States. In some places in Asia, and I know in Australia and even in Italy, they tend to go even larger than this. But if you're just going to your standard fireworks downtown, this is about as large as it's going to get. And that's really spectacular. That's absolutely incredible. You saw, I want to watch that effect one more time. You can see when it gets up into the air that it has the inner effect and the outer effect. And that's really, really, yeah, that's spectacular to see. So again, now we've really taken a step up in class. We've really, and then look at that glitter rain with the willow hanging. That's a really beautiful shell.
Moi, Mom.
Now 24 inches. Now we're getting into the big boys. Now we're getting into the crazy stuff. That's 2 feet wide, and you can see. Just look at that. Look how full that is, and look at the layers of the effect. Again, if you think about it, a 1.75-inch shell, that's diameter, right? So that's like that, right? That means that a 2-foot shell, 24 inches is 2 feet. That's as big as this. I don't know if both my hands are in the screen. You're talking about an enormous shell just filled with effects and powder, and you can see the effect of it up in the sky. You can see just how perfectly symmetrical it is. and again, the multi-layers of the effects. And then in the end, you have that glitter at the very end of it, just completely filling the sky. Really, really beautiful. Now we're going to take another big step up. So we've added another foot now in diameter, which is exponentially larger in circumference. And so this is really going to be crazy. And you can see now already they have it so that the tail, a lot of the fireworks that we light has tails, whether that's a whistling tail or a tiger tail. The tail of this thing is 4 or 6 inch shells that light off as it goes up. That's how big this guy is, that as it's going up into the air, it's lighting off 6 inch shells along the way. And here you can see, I want to pause it right here. Perfect. Because here you can see now we've reached a size of shell where one of those layers is not just stars. One of those layers is actually more shells. And so the black powder layer is lighting off the timed fuse of another entire round of smaller shells. And so inside of this larger effect, you're seeing all of these different shells going off, and it makes for an unbelievable effect. And then look how long this just hangs in the air. That's really incredible to see. And then a glitter at the end of it. That's really beautiful. And now we're going to really step up in class. 48 inches. And these are more or less the largest fireworks in the world are going to be 48 inches. A 4-inch shell that they can really go crazy with what they want to do with something like this. These are really the record-breaking type shells. And so let's see what this guy does when he gets up into the air. So you have the initial explosion, and then one layer of shells, and then another layer of shells. I mean, look at that. That's incredible. And that's really incredible. So again, you have multiple layers of shells now. You don't just have layers of effects and one layer of shells. You have multiple layers of shells in a 48-inch shell. It's a dream to even see stuff. Forget about lighting something like that. I'm never going to light anything like that off. That's beyond fantasy. But just to be in a place where they light something like this off. I know a lot of this stuff happens in Asia, and just to be in a place where they light something like that off is really that's a dream. That's a bucket list type item. And I think we have one more that this, I believe, is the largest firework in the world. I don't even know what size it is. I couldn't find a size listed on this thing. But just watch what this guy does. This is unbelievable. So you have the initial explosion, then a layer of shells, and then look at that. Look at that. And it's absolutely breathtaking. It fills up the entire night sky with shells, all from one initial firework that was lit off. I mean, I can't even imagine how satisfying it would be to light something like that off and just completely fill up the night sky with fireworks. And it's unbelievable. I want, just for fun, that was the last one. Just for fun, let's go to the very beginning and watch the 1.75-inch shells, and then compare that to the larger shell. So again, you can see these are nice shells in terms of consumer shells. It has a very cool effect. It's very well made. It's a ring, and then it has the ghost circle on the outside. But now let's compare that to that very last shell that we saw. And you can see, so from 1.75 inches all the way up to more than 48 inches. Who knows how big it actually is? You can see this thing going up into the air. And then just, again, you have this one layer, and then this is really where it's at. I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, that's really incredible. I mean, to fill up an entire night sky. I mean, he couldn't even get it all. If you could have zoomed out even more, there's more. You can see it's cut off around the edges. I mean, just completely fill up the night sky with effects. I mean, that's spectacular. And again, I would just, someday, it's a bucket list item. Someday I'll be there when they light one of those things off. They're not lighting them off all night long. They have a show going on, and then that's sort of, everybody is waiting for that moment. They probably light something like that off once a year. And there's probably a team of people that all they do all year long is building that one firework effect. I mean, there's so much tedious handwork that goes into something like that it's incredible. There's documentaries on YouTube you can look up that you can see people building these things. And you know what? They don't always go right. These things are so complicated. They don't always go right. So imagine you spend months and months and months building a firework shell like this, and then everybody is anticipating and everybody is waiting. and then it fails on you. I mean, that's definitely something that has happened in this world before. Meanwhile, that's going to do it for us for this time. If you enjoy this kind of content, please let us know in the comments. If there's anything, suggestions you have for things that we should react to, definitely let us know. I'm more than happy to explore and try to find new stuff to react to and to watch here on the channel. Otherwise, go ahead and like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.